create a state to satisfy his needs. So that is what we are talking about. Excuse me. He talks about social contract theory basically talks about individual and the state. This is sole person of like individual perspective. Initially starts as individual perspective. Later collectivism and all will read in the criticisms. So initially it talks about how individual wanted to have a peaceful life, or the state he was living in was not peaceful enough. So he went for the establishment of a state that an authority, creation of an authority that would make his life peaceful, or make him wish to own his property, protect his property, etc. So there are three main proponents of this theory. You might have read Hobbes, Locke, and Rousseau by now. If not, yeah, mostly you might have read it by now. So the three main proponents, this contractualists, they are called. So Thomas Hobbes, John Locke, and Jean-Jacques Rousseau. So their main theory of social contract is origin of theory of state. So this is third one in connection to origin of theory of state theories. So let us divide what is social contract. Okay, social means you socialites. They call it socialites. Like I'm a socialite. Matlab you have connection with the society, you have better understanding of the society. So social means in connection with the society. And contract is general English vocabulary where an agreement is rendered between two or more individuals, and they come into accepting certain terms and conditions, that if we sign this contract from now on, we will be following the terms and conditions which are present in the contract. But there's an counter again to it. What if one person is not following the contract? The other two who abided by it are following. Then they can withdraw or withcall or revolt. These are all the terms given by in the upcoming theories by Hobbes, Locke, and Rousseau. So social contract theory is implied to bring society together in establishing a state. So the state has come into an existence with the social contract theory. They believe state is an artificial creation. So this is a deliberate attempt by man to either protect his property, life, or to have an authority, or to have peaceful exchange of their needs in the society. So the next slide. So there are fundamental assumptions, a state of nature and contract. Okay, state of nature means what? What is the situation of nature they are living in? That is the state of nature. Here, the term state is not directly the state that we are talking about. So, state of nature means position of nature, like what are the current scenario in the nature that the times they were talking about. And the next one is contract. Contract, under contract, you'll read about sovereign, then the assumptions or the powers of sovereign. So here, if we talk about state of nature in all things, it is pre-political condition, because there is no established institution. So they call it pre-political conditions. In some philosophers or political thinkers, it is pre-social too. We'll read it in the next slide. So where natural law exists and no civil law, no government exists, because there is no concept of authority, or there is no concept of institutions. And to regulate man. Okay, man is free being. He can do whatever he want. Because he's born with such natural rights, so he meant to do what he is born with. Okay, so contract. Contract means what? Contract is men came out of SON. SON is state of nature. From now on, we will be using this abbreviation. So men came out of SON and signed a contract, which led to the origin of either state or civil society. Okay, the distinction is different depending on the different political thinker. So it's both. If you are talking about Hobbes, Locke, and Rousseau, it's both state, civil society, civil society. Okay, Hobbes, Locke, and Rousseau. So people surrender their natural rights, because no matter what contract you sign, you should never be denied of your natural rights. So here, what man does, he surrenders his natural rights in return from the for the protection from the state. So these natural rights, which have like right to life, equality, and private property, I'll render it to the state, and in turn, uh, law-wise, civil law-wise, I'll get the protection of the state, where my private property would be protected if state recognizes that this property belongs to Navya. So like that, in return for the protection of the state, not only that, for protection of my life also. So, but there are drawbacks. We'll read the drawbacks then. We can't keep criticizing the theory initial uh, starting itself. So, with differences in opinions of state of nature, contract type, sovereignty, these philosophers led to the evolution of social contract theory. So, who philosophers? Hobbes, Locke, and Rousseau. They have difference in opinions of state of nature or and human nature, and the contract agreement and the type of sovereignty they wanted to have in the state. This led to the three different types of social contract theory. So let us understand what is social contract theory. This is not something, it was most popular in 17th and 19th century, but doesn't mean that it was something new. It came out of box. So it's basically an idea of authority or an independent ruler or an elected ruler based on agreement with him and the subjects. Subjects are what the individuals. Okay. So social contract theory is an idea of authority of a ruler based on agreement to him and subjects. It's a very old concept. So this concept we have seen in Mahabharata, then Kautilya's Ardhashastra, Buddhist and Jain literature. What does Kautilya say in Ardhashastra? That king acquired such powers through concrete agreement or the contract. Like here, the authority of a ruler based on agreement to him and subjects are very old. The next one is sophist, the Greek, ancient Greek philosophers. Sophist says that state is man-made and it is established through contract. Okay. It's nobody says state is a natural outcome. They all agreed upon state is an artificial institution, which is just made for the man to have a peaceful living or to protect his natural rights. So, according to Roman law, it regarded individual as an only source of political authority. So here it gives power to individual, not the divine origin, where in the previous class we read the divine origin theory where king somehow been installed by God, like he's the virtue of God on earth. But here they still they run opposite to it. So they say individuals are the only source of political authority. They don't believe in this divine origin theory. It's just the man made the state. So Cicero is main proponent in Roman law in saying that individual is the only source of authority and main proponent. The next one is who are main exponents of social contract theory. Both Locke and Thomas Hobbes and John Locke, they are both political English political thinkers. So why we are stressing out English political thinkers? Because you'll understand how the times, contemporary times of their contemporary times in the English kingdom or the English period helped influence their ideas and their works. Then Rousseau is a French thinker. So these are all called social contractualists. The state came into an existence on deliberation of contract by the man. Then comes the question how. So till now we have been understanding uh, theories of state. What is social contract theory? What do I mean by social? What do I mean by contract? And what are the two assumptions that led to the differences of three political thinkers? One is state of nature and the contract. Then, what is social contract theory? The introduction and its references in Mahabharata, Arthashastra, Buddhist, Jain literature, sophists, and Roman law's opinion on it. Then next, we'll understand how, what is social contract theory. So let us understand Hobbes' social contract theory. So you might have read Hobbes by now. So if spoken from Hobbes, he was born in 1588, Spanish Armada, and he became a private tutor to Charles II. And Charles II, those times, uh, in during the war time, civil war 1642, Hobbes supported the monarchy against the individual republican against the outlook. So it was influenced by intellectual and philosophical outlook, new science of his times. So of course, because of civil war erupted, he between the supporters of and the critics of absolute monarchy, and Hobbes took the side of absolute monarchy. So as his was a private tutor to Charles, so Charles too, most of the policies or the laws that he has been put up after becoming the monarch were mostly influenced by Hobbes' lectures. So then, theory of contract is specially written in the book Leviathan in 1651. You have to remember this year and what is Leviathan. And if someone asks you what is Leviathan, you have to remember 1651, then Hobbes. It's an important MCQ. So political views, influences on Hobbes, basically we are reading. Influences on Hobbes are by prevailing conditions of England. So prevailing conditions of England means there's a saying that the political thinkers are the members or they are the outcomes of the times they live in. So, prevailing conditions such as civil war of 1642, which is between anti supporters and the critics of absolute monarchy, then this thing, absolute monarchy and the influence, led for the Hobbes to have written Leviathan. Then other important works are De Corpore, 1640, Deceive, 1642, and this is mostly on civil war. Then Leviathan is on logic and systemic treatise on British politics. You have to remember what is Leviathan on. It is logical and systemic treatise on British politics, and what is Deceive or Deceive, 1652 is on civil war. So next, this is a basic introduction to Hobbes, like what influenced him to write social contract theory. So then state of nature according to Hobbes. This is an interesting and dark era for if we are reading Hobbes. So Hobbes paints man is pre-social, both pre-social and pre-political. Why? Because he says that we all know pre-political because there's no proper institution or proper absolute authority in state of nature. But here Hobbes says man is pre-social also. Means means why? Here he paints a dark picture of human nature. Why? Because the influence he had here previously on civil wars and all the wars that has been happening, this led him to picture this human life is selfish, egoistic, and motivated by his desires, and all he does is in preservation of his security and to gain power. So he also agrees that man is born free both in equal body and mind, but his desire for physical strength, his desire for power, or his desire to accumulate property makes him selfish and egoistic and cruel. So, but the quest for power, security, pride, and glory, this causes conflict. These relationships are based on mutual suspicion and hostility. See, even though individuals were having one-on-one relationship, but they were still on the edge of eruption of the war. Okay, that balance where although they have been doing good, but this eruption of war could happen anytime. So, in state of nature, state is at war. He concluded that state is always at war, and conflicts are basically between a man to a man against every man. Then might is right. Because what? If we go here in the third point, man is born free, equal in body and mind. He said that everybody is equal, but their quest for power, security, pride, glory causes conflict, and the physically strong one and the mentally strong one would erupt as an winner. So that's why he goes for the concept of might is right. This he's talking about state of nature. Okay. That's why he calls it pre-social because human beings are fighting among themselves. There's always this eruption of war. then as there are no moral institutions to look into what is right or wrong, like men are free, they are born with natural rights to do anything, to acquire anything, to harm anybody else only in order to save themselves or in order to preserve themselves, they could go at any extent to protect their peace or to protect their property, etc. So, natural right. Natural right is that he can keep all that he can get. See here, that's what. He possesses two rights, natural rights and natural liberties. So, where this natural right is that he can keep whatever he can get. Who can get? The might is right. The stronger one can get anything by oppressing the weaker one. Then natural liberty, all power for preservation of wealth and life development. So his liberty to do anything, what he can do to preserve his wealth, the property that he has secured, because he's stronger in comparison with the few other members in the society, and what can be used for his life development. He can have peaceful life in comparison with the others. So here, what the society, even though it was equal when it was formed, but with man's greed and quest for power, it has become imbalanced. Like the mightier ones are here and the weaker ones have come down here. So also no scope for agriculture, science and art. Why? Why? Because he's always constantly fighting. He's constantly fighting for his life. He's constantly fighting for preservation of him in the society. So he's always fighting. There's no time for him to focus on agriculture or even development of sciences, arts, or culture. So that's why it's called pre-social also. So society is poor, nasty, brutish, and short. So this last line is state of nature or depiction of Hobbes, and this is a very darker picture that he quotes of human nature in state of nature. That's why he calls it pre-social also. For him, what? For him, pre-social and pre-political. That man is brutish, mannish, man's life is short, man's always having this quest for power. Also, there are no proper institutions, so there's no moral authority to look into, so he's at wish to do whatever he can. Then state of nature, he terms state of nature is state of turmoil and constant fear of war led to creation of an authority. So why did he wanted a contract to be developed? Because it's always state of war. It's always a state of disturbances. So constant fear, this led to he wanted to have an authority to be created for the main reason. And what happens if this authority is created? This is a question that you should tackle. What happens is uh, you give up all your rights to the sovereign authority for the preservation for your self-preservation, and only duty of sovereign is to protect his subjects. Okay, this is a contract among people. This is not that contract with the sovereignty. Sovereignty is established after the people have signed a contract. Okay, so people, so sovereignty is not part of contract. So I'll explain again. People come together, sign a contract, and they give up their rights. They establish a sovereignty. They give up their rights to the sovereignty. In what? In return for what? So that sovereignty will protect their rights as an institution. Here, this contract is signed among the people only. This is not, sovereignty is not included. So what happens here? Sovereignty is not bound by those contract agreements. So, as sovereignty is not bound by those contract agreements, sovereignty is at will to do anything. So, this gives sovereignty the absolute powers. It is called absolute sovereignty. So, these powers are unlimited, indivisible, and inseparable. Okay. These are unlimited because sovereign is not part of contract. Indivisible, you cannot divide the powers because it's an single entity, and inseparable. You cannot separate based on executive, legislature, and judiciary. These are all unitely combined. Then individuals, also he says individual cannot revolt. He's against revolution. Okay, he's against revolution in comparison to Locke and uh, Rousseau. So, sovereign is absolute, decides just and unjust. The sovereign is authority which look into the nation states, the state of nature's political institutions. So everybody must obey it. You cannot revolt against it because he says if everybody revolts against it, then what is the purpose of getting into a contract? Which makes sense, right? If uh, if seen from Hobbes' perspective, this totally makes sense. And so it is absolute sovereign, not total sovereign, because there are certain areas where sovereign doesn't have power. So what you can do, you can go with you have full authority or full power which are permitted by the sovereign, and also you have full authority and full power in laws which are not addressed or which are not permitted by sovereign also. So what does it mean? So here he says individual cannot revolt against sovereign, but this line that absolute sovereign, it's not total sovereign. There's a loophole that you can do where, in order to protect your life, in order to protect your natural rights, you can always go against sovereign unless they are forbidden by the sovereign. Otherwise, you will be doing wrong, and you'll be dictated as you'll lose your freedom. So Hobbesian state is not is an authoritarian state and not totalitarian because it's not under control of single individual. And he says, according to him, Hobbes, monarchy is the best form of government, less competition, easy power for one man's power. Okay. He goes for like he doesn't like democracy. He says democracy, the power devolved among all the subjects, but it would be better managed if a one single man rules over it. And also it causes less competition as there's only one human being, and it's a best form according to Hobbes. And of course there are criticisms to any theories, any political scientist. So no fault with views on human nature and state of nature, because human nature and state of nature was always in turmoil, war of turmoil. So there's no wrong in Hobbes painting a dark picture of human nature. But if we answer this, he says man is selfish, man is all of preservation. How do you expect a brutish and selfish man to come into contract with the other individuals and give up his rights? Right. Because he do not recognize animal instincts of right. Because he just went that, acha, even though he's selfish and antisocial, he'll still enter into the contract. But what if he doesn't? There's no he did not who does not talk about what if man doesn't. And it's illogical and irrational because signing a contract, giving up your rights, and making an absolute sovereignty, who can do anything, who can work against your interests also. So this is the irrational, illogical, and also not. Um, there's no perfect scientific evidence to prove. And he doesn't talk about state and government. He just says that the contract creates a state, and who forms a particular majority to rule the state. So he doesn't talk about the government because why? Because state is permanent and government is formed by majority, and this can be dismantled when sovereign dies. Example, India is a state, and the main authority who has majority forms a government. Example, for now, if we talk about prime minister, prime minister is majority forms the government. But if prime minister resigns or prime minister dies, then the government dismantles. It loses stability, right? It forms automatically. It's in constitutional laws. So he does not talk about that division. Then pre-social, pre-political, but we all know that society exists by nature, and he ignores political sovereignty and legal views that are insufficient for political philosophy. And also, he do not distinguish between rights recognized by the states and the rights which are for the personality development. He do not divide between the political rights and the moral rights which are meant for the development of an individual after forming the state, because as he was pre-social, there's no particular rights to look his morality under check, or him living by the constitution, or him living by the authority laws. So that's a drawback of Hobbes. Locke. Next, coming to Locke. Locke is in times of glorious revolutions, and he's also an ideological father for American Revolution because his views on social contract theory has enabled the American Revolution, them building them const- making their constitution. His main works are on toleration, 1689, essay concerning human condition, 1690, two treatises on government, 1690, both in the same year. He wrote enormous works. Then first treatise, here we talk about two treatises, right? So the first treatise talk about divine right concept of Filmer, that we read it in the previous chapter, that a king is the descendant of Adam, the God sent, and his form of man on earth, right? So the second treatise talks about social contract theory, which is now important for us. So Locke give a very optimistic view of human life. So he says men are decent, orderly, and rational, governed by the reason. He totally presents an altruistic picture of man. There he is very optimistic that man is a good, he's equal, free, independent, and he's very decent. He's governed by his own motivations and reasons. Then you might understand then what is the purpose of getting into a contract. Because in opposite to Hobbes, he pictures a very he gives a very good picture in comparison to Hobbes, right? Hobbes give a darker picture of human being. There it makes sense that they have to make a contract then to have a preservation of themselves. But if we see men are decent, orderly, rational, governed by reason, equal, free, and independent, then why does anybody want to get into contract? Why? Because his state of nature, man is pre-political but not pre-social. Okay, there's no society, there's no nothing. Oh, it's opposite. Man is pre-social but not pre-political, and no superior authority but governed by the natural laws. Yeah, natural law. Law gives importance to natural laws, and his theory of private property is celebrated by many thinkers till date. And he quotes a picture like his peaceful goodwill, mutual assistance, and preservation. So men are guided by laws of nature and they enjoy natural rights. So what are those rights? Right to equality, right to life, and right to property. See, whatever happens, he cannot be deprived of his these three rights. Even though he commits a crime and his right to life has been at stake, he cannot be deprived of his right to property. So no state of was but no state of nature was but based on law, reason, and equality. So the state was not based on law, reason, and equality. Contract. Why get into a contract if it is not a state of war? Because due to absence of defining natural law. Here, if you see, here it says men enjoy natural rights, right to equality, life and property. But what are those natural rights? Uh, how are those natural rights protected? Like suppose, how do I protect myself from you invading my property? How? But also he says men are mutually cooperative. There's no limit. There would be some men who would not be following such regulations or such natural laws. So he also gives the concept. So due to absence of defining of natural law and absence of competent authority, like higher authority to look into if some men are not following this natural law and they are obstructing my natural rights, and in absence of authority to enforce it. Suppose if he obstructs my natural rights or he causes, uh, if he causes this issues to my rights, then these three conditions led Locke's man to enter into a contract. So his contracts are two contracts. Hobbes is only one contract. His two contracts are one is civil contract and government contract. civil contract was to create an equal society and make every man follow the competent authority and protect each other's rights. And the government contract is civil society, between the civil society and the ruler. Like once they enter into a contract, the civil society is formed, and the civil society will make one sovereign who will look into who will look into enforcing the natural law. He is a competent authority. So here for law, government is a trust on behalf of people, and it can be dismissed. Here, comparison with Hobbes, he gives differences of governments and the state. So it can be dismissed for breach of trust. And dissolution of government does not mean dissolution of civil society. You are hope you are getting the difference between Hobbes and Locke. So if a government is dismantled, doesn't mean that civil society will dissolve and it will go to the state of nature. No. They can still, with the majority, they can still elect the other people and form a government. Next, he gives limited power as it is between the society and the ruler, and it's on behalf of people. So it's in the hands of people, and power comes from the people. Government based is based on consent of the people. So if government is going against the people, they have ru- all authority to call that government down and install who other favorable ones. So he divides his functions into legislative, executive, and federal. This devolution is not given by Hobbes. So legislature, he gives supreme authority because it's a majority of the people. It contains the people that are majorly elected, and the majority is the people. So this gave concept to political sovereignty, and gave sovereign power to the people. So also there's a criticism on the basis of history. Why? There's no historical evidences to prove that this has worked before. So, and also Locke recognizes force of political sovereignty without adequate recognition to the legislature. He says legislature is supreme, not sovereign. But if legislature is supreme and sovereign is an authority that you have installed to look into the laws that to implement, then who has power to govern, or who has power to devolve functions to look into that laws have been look forward? So this division is not given properly by the law. Also, he divided the government functions into three, but he does not divide what are true functions of legislative, what are true functions of the sovereign. So sometimes community is supreme, so he is very skeptical. Sometimes he calls that community is a major one, like the individual itself is the highest authority because they give consent for the contract. But sometimes he says legislature is supreme. We all know. So uh, this confusion between the Hobbes theories is one of the criticism, and it gives, because if we keep reading the theory only, we'll understand that acha, he says community is supreme here, but in the next line he says legislature is supreme. I mean, do I read community as a supreme one or legislature as supreme one? If you have got confused by now, it's the theory itself is little bit confused. So in the criticisms, you can understand. I hope criticism by reading the criticisms helped you understand your confusion is legit, and also gives that right to a revolution. So Hobbes giving no right to revolution and the law giving the right to revolution is because one cannot obey legislature and sometimes revolt against it. Like why? People themselves are giving their rights to become the form a contract, and why do they want to revolt against the legislature? You're getting it right. So his contributions are mostly the doctrine of natural rights, which are indispensable, and theory of consent. He's famous for his tacit consent. Tacit consent is silent consent that I give power to the government for serving me. Okay, so consent is a source of authority. Our next important one is Rousseau. So Rousseau is basically about combination of Locke and Hobbes by cutting some points, by adding some points. So he was born in Geneva, 1712. And his Emily is a treatise. These both are works of Rousseau. So Emily is a treatise on education, and social contract talks about social contract theory. So he his works inspired French Revolution of 1789, and same as Locke, he says human nature is not gloomy. Human beings are good, but not as good as what Locke has said. Because he says human beings are not bad by nature, but they are dependent on each other in order to satisfy their needs. This is what Rousseau says. So that's what state of nature is not bad, noble with idyllic happiness. This line, if you remember, it's great. Otherwise, also you can write men farm or men talk to each other, have relationships in order to satisfy their needs. So the man is destined to live happy. We all know happy life to satisfy his needs. He's independent, contested, self-sufficient. Here the word self-sufficient is important. And also, no, they have no notion of virtue, vice, good or bad. They're self-sufficient. Then, if they're self-sufficient among themselves, they're happy, then why do I want to get into the contract? Same question like Locke. Why? Because reason or desire is cause of social ills. Rousseau is also known as Rousseau is an propounder of romanticism and Western political philosophy because he says with the development of science, with the development of agriculture, men and with the increase of reasoning, the men started to forget about moral institutions. They started to become selfish, self-centered, and egoistic. That's why they should go back to the primitive societies. It's like going back to the nature. He's romanticizing going back to the nature and living in the primitive societies, which is not possible in 17th century because by then everything have come and nation state system, all the theories have been developed, state as an institution have developed. So Rousseau had come up with another concept of social contract theory. So this reason a reason means desire to have something. This catastrophic events led for the increase of reason. Why? Because in order to save the self-preservation, they led for the development of agriculture or technology, and this decreased moral institutions and private property led to the violence, evils, and jealousy. Because men, their only motive was to survive and have a better life, so everybody started accumulating the private property. So this led only way to for Rousseau is to make install a government through contract. So Rousseau's contract theory is civil freedom. It gives you all the civil freedom because giving up your natural rights and to the sovereign authority, and in return those authority will give you establish civil laws which give you civil freedom. So individuals surrender their rights and in return gets protection through civil law. Yes, each man gives himself to all and therefore gives himself to nobody in particular. Here he's talking about general will and the real will, and contract is the collective body because every man gives himself to all and nobody in particular. It's accumulation. It's a community as in whole. So to him, sovereignty is it is people constituted as political community through social contract. Here, the second line, each man gives himself to all and therefore gives himself to nobody in particular is what the sovereignty, true sovereignty of Rousseau. So general will is meant to do more good rather than the real will or my individual will, which is mostly influenced by my desires, my personal ideas. The social contract deprives man of his natural liberty. Okay, he says why? Because the man gives up their liberty, every rights to the sovereign, and in return, sovereign gives me what I have lost, more than what I have lost. That is what the statement means. In order to compensate, it has given me more than what I have lost. You're getting it. So he says, man is forced to be free. The statement of Rousseau, man is forced to be free. Is that what it means? Because I am free sometimes, but I am forced to be free all the times by entering into a contract. because I'm given more than what I lost. I've been compensated enough. So this contradicts with the Enlightenment era, but at least not subduing anyone with violence. Example, this violence of social equality with the American natives, holy wars. So theory of general will. This is not important here, but I've just added in order if you have forgotten what is general will. General will and individual will both are different. So general will is always right. If my actual will might be wrong sometimes, but general will can never be wrong. And it is will of an individual when he thinks of common good. It's good for me, it's good for if I'm thinking good for you also, then it's a general will. Good for everybody else in the civil society that I have established. And the actual will is motivated by my own interests, and real will is like collective interest. If I'm doing good for you also, then it's a general will. And lower self, higher self, it talks about like here it's selfish, here it's not selfish. AW means actual will, RW means real will. So it's unstable. Of course, my desires keep changing, so it has to be unstable. And real will, as it is a collective interest, and everybody's common good has been gathered. So it's almost all constant, depending on the situations. If it's any emergency of the war, then only its stability might change, but overall it will be the constant one. Then actual will is unstable, inconsistent. Real will is stable and constant. Man freedom consists of overcoming actual will and follow general will. Yeah, he's forced to be free. He's supposed to give up his own desires and follow a general will, which is good for him and the neighbor also. Rousseau made distinction between state and government, just like Locke. And political society brought into existence based on general will. General will is what? Doing good for the whole community. And government is created by law made by general because it looks into the development of everybody. And powers can be withdrawn at any time. Same like Locke. What? Because if you are not understanding if you think that they're going against, they're not representing your needs, if they are not representing your wants and they are against your natural rights, then you can call it upon at any time. So he's an a propounder of democracy because of his influenced by direct democracy in Geneva, and citizens can actually be present. But criticism, unhistorical, imaginary, because why would I suppress my actual will in order to be making the whole community as in good? Makes sense, right? So Rousseau's theory has both organic and mechanistic view because he calls for general will, then also he calls for direct democracy, the authorities and the citizens, like contradicting both. And if criticized general will is neither general nor will of all, you can also remember the statement general will is neither general nor will of all by who Rousseau, or either they'll ask you to write this whole statement. And the good thing is he gave importance to direct democracy and popular sovereignty, but general will, he gave unlimited power because it represents the will of all and the contract that they have signed into. And it gives rise to totalitarian democracy, like one person but a democratic rule. And also, he gives no distinction between state and society. Contributions of Rousseau. He's the first political philosopher, modern political philosopher after the Locke era, and supporter of political sovereignty. Impact on lawmakers of USA and France, we all know. And father of romanticism, like going back, romanticism is he is romanticizing the nature, going back to the primitive societies. This is not true literal English vocab, but the political science notion or the philosophical notion of romanticizing on certain subject means focusing on that true subject, thinking about like let us go back in times. Then comparison, Rousseau's voice is voice of Locke and hands of Hobbes. It's a creation of contract. Here Hobbes means H, Locke is L, and Rousseau is R. You can actually make a table with three rows and columns, Hobbes, Locke, and Rousseau. Then if you write down, then you might understand who said what. So Hobbes, man is selfish, competitive. Locke's man is decent and rational. Rousseau's man is noble, savage, lives in idyllic life. Then state of nature is state of war for H. L, want of inconvenience, one of the inconvenience. Then conditions, pre-social, pre-political. L and R, Locke and Rousseau, it's pre-political and not pre-social. You'll understand after the class if you write down a table. And also, it's very easy. You have to keep on reading, repeating, then only you'll understand this social contract theory. Otherwise, it's a little bit difficult because the thinkers, they contradict themselves in between the theories itself. So you are not a thinker, neither am I. So we have to keep revising it so that we'll understand what is the proper theory over a longer run, not just the purpose of writing for an exam or attempting an internal exam. So H and R, one contract, Hobbes and Rousseau, Locke, two contracts, social and government. Then a sovereign opinion for Hobbes, set up by people, transfer of powers. Then Locke, supreme authority is with people with limited power. Then Rousseau says people and capacity directed by general will and absolute power of all. This is just summary of all the things which I have spoke earlier, but in a better, easy version. Revolution, no revolution for Hobbes. Revolution, yes, for Locke and Rousseau. Society, state structure for Hobbes. Political society for Locke and Rousseau. Power, absolute monarchy, limited monarchy, and democracy. These differences is an important question. So I'm telling you ahead. You can make a notes. It's very easy. Only if you make a diagram of a table. Then evaluation, historical fiction, we all know, oriented, but they were more community oriented, not individual based. And initially they say they are individualist, but later they have become a collectivist. Then physical grounds, not an artificial creation, but a mere extension of family, like Aristotle. Assumption of natural rights, natural liberty is illogical. That the man is born with natural rights, everything. They should be protected at any cost. And also private property is a natural right. So they say they are illogical little bit, can't be proved. So then next theory, Marxist theory of origin of state. So Marxist theory of origin of state says what? In primitive stage of social life, so they believe, they are believer of there is no state, there is no class system in a primitive society. But the society slowly started dividing into hostile states. So this hostile state classes, one of the dominant class in an hierarchical method started to establish an authority and overruling or overpowering the other non-dominant class. So they say origin of state is class of context of class antagonism. This line, if you remember, then the whole theory can be summarized very easily. So example, how this society has, how these classes have come to dominate over the other one is agriculture development, scientific progress, creation of property. As usual, the same theory that have been followed. And but here the class system comes into picture. So this led to the creation of dominant class, and state is a byproduct of society's internal development. Internal development of what? The classes, the antagonism of classes, division of classes, the weaker classes and the dominant classes. And the dominant class led to the creation of state to uphold their authority. That's the only reason that the class system led for the origin of theory of state. They also say the state is not an original institution, it's an artificial creation of dominant class. So organized on the basis of rich class, poor class, and how do you divide rich class and poor class? Based on the property, private property they own. So state is a necessity once the accumulation of property started and the dominance. Yes, with the accumulation of property and dominance of the classes, state has become a necessity to ensure that the property is safe. Right. It's an origin of class antagonisms. That's it. It's not an natural state. If for all the in social contract theory and the Marxist theory of origin of state, state is an creation. So according to Marx, state is an organ, class, role, creation, dominance of order. But Engel also he says state formed with economically dominant class. So this economically dominant class, interestingly, also becomes the politically dominant class. Because in order to protect their property, they have established an institution where who will look after this institution, the same dominant classes who wanted to protect their property. So they start to exploiting the oppressed classes. That's their only purpose. Okay. So then Lenin, he says, product of manifestation and recovering of class antagonism, state formed to bring peace, order, and unity by the dominant class. And for Gramsci, state has originated because domination of hegemony of one class over the other. So remember Marx's definition, Engels' definition of state, Lenin's definition of state, Gramsci's definition of state. Then you can write this answer if it's long, short, or MCQs or anything. So the main assumption is that state has not always existed. It's just a creation of human being. Okay. So public opinion, they regulated the classes' rights to dismiss each other at any time. And state is a product of class society. We know we have read there because it's because of dominant class wanted to protect their property, wanted to have their economic stability. They have come together and formed. But this Marxist theories believe that once the classlessness happens in the state, then state will vanish off. That is what the communist parties believe in, right? The disintegration main failure was this. If state is a product of class system, class society, the appearance of classes will vanish, the disappearance of classes, and state system will fall. Here, they say state is a natural creation. Sorry, state is an artificial creation of the classes. But once, why classes? Because classes started accumulating property. And once the distribution is equal and everybody is made equal, and the dominance of one class decreases, then state also goes up because they say state only formed to protect the dominant classes and help them oppress the over classes. So here interesting, they want state system to vanish. Criticism force has played a dominant role rather than the class antagonisms. So they do not give any scientific explanations. So these both theories are lack of scientific explanations and historical uh, examples, not just class dominance, but various also other factors like geographical, the wars, the social system. These are all equally played role. So they say social development will lead to vanishment of state, and state is an instrument of protection, order, unity, and peace. For, we are criticizing the Marxist theory of state. So why do we want a state? If we talk about social contract theory perspective, it's just an instrument of protection to maintain unity, to maintain peace in the state, right? So it doesn't disappear because the main agenda is to have that. They say it disappears once we have classlessness. I mean, that's not viably possible. That's why, of course, I cannot uh, sit down here to debate. So, class of slaves, owners, feudal lords, wage laborers emerged when state has already came into existence. This is a criticism. So, state also plays an important role in promoting common good. Yeah, it's an welfare state. So, not an organ of class, but the conciliation of socio-economic interests that would lead to disappearance of it. And the summary state, according to Marx, is not an ethical idea because it's solely uh, because it's a formation of the what do we call it? It's a formation of class antagonisms, which led to the dominant class oppressing the weaker classes, and not produced or established by contract. Yeah, we haven't come across the word contract or consent, but it's just a product of socio-economic transformation of one classes becoming economically dominant and power hungry. So they wanted to protect themselves. They wanted this institution of state. And state is a product of class contradictions and vanishes with disappearance of classes. So in the social contract theory, we haven't come across this concept of state disappearing once um, the contract has been made. But this contract, the government disappears if people revolt and the state stays intact. Whereas in Hobbes, he doesn't give distinctions, but he does not mean that state vanishes. But here, Marxist theory of state expect the state to vanish once the class contradictions are resolved. And thank you. Yeah, I am. You can you can shoot your doubts. Any doubts? Can I send PPT in the chat? You'll find it online. I'm not sending the file, sorry. You'll find it online as it is recorded online if I'm not wrong. So yeah. Any questions? So hope you are all clear with this theory of origin of state. I don't have the link. You have to find it by yourself. Sorry. Hmm. So okay, I'll end the class. Uh, yeah, see you all in the next class.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Okay. You'll read this lesson and ask me next time. Okay, fine.